Imagine Europe in 1347. Ships arrive at the port of Messina, Sicily, carrying something far worse than plague-ridden rats. The sailors stumble off the vessels with vacant eyes, pale skin, and an insatiable hunger. Within days, the infected don't just die. They rise again, spreading a contagion that turns the living into the undead. This is the terrifying alternate history where the Black Death wasn't a bacterial plague, but a zombie virus that swept through medieval Europe. In our timeline, the Black Death killed an estimated 75 to 200 million people across Eurasia and North Africa. But what if instead of succumbing to bubonic plague caused by Yersinia pestis, victims transformed into flesh-eating monsters? The social, political, and technological ramifications would reshape human civilization in ways almost unimaginable. When the first cases appear in Italian port cities, medieval doctors have no framework to understand what's happening. They attribute the outbreak to miasma, bad air, or divine punishment, just as they did with the real plague. But unlike the historical Black Death, victims don't stay dead. Within hours of succumbing to the infection, corpses reanimate with a primal drive to feed on living flesh. The bite from an infected person spreads the pathogen rapidly, creating an exponential growth in the undead population. Medieval cities, with their narrow streets and densely packed populations, become death traps. Stone walls that once protected citizens from invading armies now trap them inside with the infected. In Florence, Venice, and Genoa, the wealthy flee to countryside estates, while the poor barricade themselves in churches and guild halls. Religious processions meant to appease God's wrath become massacres as zombies tear through crowds of penitent believers. The feudal system faces immediate collapse. Peasants refuse to work fields when the dead walk among the crops. Knights discover their armor and weapons are ill-suited for fighting an enemy that feels no pain and cannot be intimidated. A sword thrust to the chest that would kill a human soldier merely slows a zombie. Medieval warriors quickly learn that only decapitation or destruction of the brain stops the infected permanently. Castles and fortified monasteries become humanity's last refuges. Their thick walls and limited entry points make them defensible against mindless undead hordes. Feudal lords who once competed for territory now form alliances out of necessity. The concept of chivalry evolves. Knights become zombie hunters, developing specialized tactics and weapons for fighting the undead. Warhammers and maces become preferred over swords, as crushing skulls proves more effective than slashing attacks. The Catholic Church faces an existential crisis. How do religious authorities explain the resurrection of the dead outside of Christian eschatology? Some priests declare this the biblical apocalypse, while others call it demonic possession. Exorcisms prove useless against the infected. The Church's inability to stop or explain the outbreak severely damages its authority. Simultaneously, the necessity of destroying reanimated corpses, including those of beloved family members, forces populations to overcome religious prohibitions against desecrating the dead. Agricultural collapse follows swiftly, with farmers unable to safely work fields and livestock being devoured by zombies. Food production plummets. Surviving communities turn to fortified farming, cultivating crops within castle walls and keeping livestock in protected pens. This necessity accelerates agricultural innovation as communities experiment with intensive farming methods, crop rotation, and food preservation to maximize yields from limited safe land. Trade networks disintegrate. Merchant caravans become too dangerous as roads teem with infected. However, maritime trade adapts more successfully. Ships can avoid zombie-infested ports and coastal areas, become the primary means of communication between surviving settlements. Island communities in the Mediterranean, Britain, and Scandinavia find themselves relatively safe, becoming centers of civilization while continental Europe descends into chaos. The Renaissance arrives centuries early out of necessity. The urgent need to understand, combat, and survive the zombie plague drives rapid scientific advancement. Scholars begin systematic observation and experimentation to understand the infection's transmission, incubation period, and weaknesses. This empirical approach to a crisis accelerates the shift from medieval scholasticism to scientific method. Universities in safe zones become research centers dedicated to studying the undead. Medical knowledge advances dramatically. Doctors perform autopsies on destroyed zombies, discovering the infection's effects on human physiology. They develop early concepts of contagion and disease transmission. Quarantine procedures become sophisticated and strictly enforced. The importance of sanitation is recognized quickly as communities realize that proper disposal of bodies prevents reanimation. This drives improvements in public health infrastructure centuries ahead of schedule. Military technology evolves to combat the undead threat. Engineers develop improved fortifications with features specifically designed against zombies. Moats filled with fire, retractable bridges, and killing zones where the undead can be safely destroyed from range. The crossbow sees enhanced development as its ability to destroy zombie brains from distance makes it invaluable. Early firearms development accelerates as blacksmiths work to create weapons effective against massed undead. Population geography shifts dramatically. Lowland areas and river valleys, once prime settlement locations, become zombie-infested danger zones. Surviving humans retreat to defensible positions, hilltop fortresses, islands, and mountain settlements. Cities like Venice, with its lagoon protection, and island communities throughout the Mediterranean become major population centers. Mountain regions in the Alps, Pyrenees, and Carpathians see population influxes as refugees seek elevated defensible positions. Social hierarchies undergo revolutionary changes. The feudal system's rigid class structure proves maladaptive in a zombie apocalypse. Survival skills matter more than noble birth. Blacksmiths, engineers, and farmers become more valued than courtiers. Women gain greater social roles as labor shortages and constant danger create opportunities outside traditional gender restrictions. The crisis serves as a great equalizer. Nobles and peasants alike can fall to zombie bites. Several decades after the initial outbreak, humanity has adapted to the new reality. Vast regions of Europe remain zombie-infested wastelands, but fortified city-states and kingdoms have established secure territories. Massive walls separate the living from the dead. Regular patrols hunt zombies in buffer zones. Children grow up learning zombie-fighting tactics alongside reading and writing. This alternate medieval world develops a unique culture centered on survival. Religious beliefs incorporate the reality of the undead, perhaps viewing them as souls trapped between life and death, or as God's test of humanity's resilience. Art and literature reflect the omnipresent threat, with illuminated manuscripts depicting zombie battles alongside traditional biblical scenes. Architecture becomes almost entirely focused on defense, creating a distinctive aesthetic of fortress cities. The long-term trajectory of Western civilization diverges significantly. The scientific revolution begins 3 centuries early, driven by desperate research into the zombie plague. Political structures evolve toward pragmatic meritocracy rather than hereditary nobility. The reduced population and concentrated settlements might delay colonial expansion, as European powers lack the numbers and resources to project force overseas. Alternatively, maritime powers might colonize more aggressively, seeking zombie-free territories in distant lands. By the time this alternate history reaches the equivalent of our modern era, humanity has either eradicated the zombie threat through advanced biomedical science or learned to maintain permanent quarantine zones. The experience of surviving the zombie plague becomes foundational to Western identity, shaping values, institutions, and worldviews in profound ways. A civilization forged in the crucible of fighting the undead would possess different priorities, ethics, and capabilities than our own. This thought experiment reveals how a single change, the nature of the pathogen causing the 14th century pandemic, could cascade into massive alterations in human history, technology, culture, and social organization.